I am 60 years old. I built a winery from nothing, 30 years of early mornings and calloused hands. Then my son stood in my own kitchen and screamed, "Give me the money, they are going to kill me." I said no. He stepped forward and threw the punch straight at my face. I hit the floor. A tooth skipped across the hardwood. I lay there, looked up at the ceiling, and smiled. Because I already knew exactly what was coming next. I'm grateful you're here with me tonight. Before this story goes any further, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. That one word from you means more than you know to this channel, Wise Revenge. This story contains fictional elements woven in for depth and reflection. Names and locations are coincidental. The message, however, is something I hope stays with you. My name is Arthur Vance. I am 60 years old, and I have the hands to prove it. Every knuckle is swollen from 3 decades of hauling barrels, repairing fermentation tanks in January cold, and gripping steering wheels on pre-dawn drives to farmers' markets before the rest of Pasadena had finished their first cup of coffee. I built Vance Artisan Winery the same way I built everything else in my life, one stubborn day at a time, without asking anyone for permission or help. The morning of Friday, September 19th started the way most mornings do at my age. I woke up at 5, made a pot of black coffee strong enough to strip paint, and drove across town to sign the final paperwork on the sale of my house. Elena Morse, my attorney, had the documents laid out across her conference table by 6:30. She walked me through every page with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. $890,000. 31 years of mortgage payments, 2 leaky roofs, 1 furnace replacement, and a kitchen renovation Sandra had talked me into the year before she got sick. All of it distilled into a wire transfer confirmation and a notarized signature. "You doing okay?" Elena asked, sliding the final page toward me. "I'm signing, aren't I?" I said. She gave me a look that meant she understood I was not doing okay. Then let it go. That is one of the things I have always appreciated about Elena. She knows when a question is just a question, and when it is a door someone does not want opened. I drove back to the house on Elmwood Avenue afterward and sat on the front steps with my coffee going cold in my hands. The yard looked the same as it always had. Sandra's rose bushes had gone scraggly without her tending them, and I had never found the heart to pull them out or the patience to learn how to care for them properly. The grass needed cutting. The mailbox still leaned 4 degrees to the left, the way it had since Leo backed the car into it when he was 16, and I told him we would fix it next weekend. We never fixed it. I was not sad exactly. Sad is too simple a word for what it feels like to sell the house where your wife died and your son grew up, and every wall holds some version of a memory you cannot get back. It is more like closing a book you have been reading for 30 years and setting it on a high shelf where you can still see the spine, but can no longer reach the pages. The money from the sale, combined with what the winery had set aside over the past several years, was going towards something I had been planning for 4 months. A property up in the Pasadena Hills, 3 bedrooms, a proper yard, high ceilings, and a view of the San Gabriel Mountains on clear mornings. I had put down the deposit in August without telling a single person. Not Elena, not Marcus, my winery manager, not Leo. Leo's 23rd birthday was 3 weeks away. I wanted to hand him the keys in person. I was still sitting on the steps, turning that thought over in my mind, when his car came around the corner. Leo drove the way he did everything fast, and a little louder than necessary. He pulled up to the curb in the modified coupe I had co-signed the financing on 2 years back, the engine making that low, deliberate growl that I had never quite gotten used to. He stepped out without cutting the engine first, which was a habit I had mentioned to him approximately 40 times. "Hey," he said, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. "Hey yourself," I said. Engine. He jogged back, killed. The ignition jogged back up. He looked good on the surface, fresh haircut, clean shirt. But there was a restlessness behind his eyes that reminded me of the way he used to look before a school presentation he had not prepared for. He sat down next to me on the step, and for approximately 4 seconds, I thought he was going to ask how I was doing, how the signing went, whether it was strange to be leaving the house after all these years. "So listen," he said instead, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About my future, actually building something real." "That's good to hear," I said carefully. "There's this retail space on Melrose. I've been looking at it for a while." He pulled out his phone, turned the screen toward me. A storefront, wide windows, good light, the kind of location that cost what it looked like it cost. Streetwear, curated pieces, some local designers. "The market's there, Dad. I've done the research." I looked at the pictures. I looked at my son. His knee was bouncing the way it always did when he was trying to hold something still inside himself. "How much?" I asked. "First month, last month, security deposit on the lease. Startup inventory, maybe some fixtures." He paused. 40,000 would cover it. To start. The number landed with a weight he was trying to make sound casual. I thought about the keys in my jacket pocket. The ones for the house in the hills sitting in a small envelope with Leo's name written on it in my handwriting. I thought about Sandra telling me once on a night when Leo had gotten into trouble at school, and I had bailed him out without consequence, that I was going to love that boy straight into a wall one day. I thought about how I had not listened. "Dad." Leo's voice had shifted slightly. Less pitch, more pressure. "The lease window doesn't stay open. I need to move on this." I took a slow breath. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw the impatience there, the assumption that the answer was already yes, and the conversation was just the formality before the transfer. And I said yes. Because I always said yes. Because he had Sandra's eyes, and I had never in my life figured out how to say no to Sandra's eyes. I opened my banking app. $40,000. I entered his account number, the one I had memorized without intending to, from all the times I had transferred smaller amounts over the years. I hit send. Leo looked at the confirmation notification on his own phone. "Cool," he said. "Yeah, this works." "That's $40,000, Leo," I said. "I know what it is, Dad." He was already standing up, already moving back toward his car. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and turned back, and for a moment, I thought there was something real crossing his face, something that looked like it might become gratitude or apology, or at least acknowledgement. "I'll call you later," he said. Then he started the engine and pulled away from the curb. I sat on the front steps of the house I had just sold and watched the car disappear around the corner. The street went quiet again. I looked down at my phone at the confirmation still on the screen. $40,000. Gone in 11 seconds. I tried to identify what I was feeling and could not quite land on a name for it. Not regret? Not exactly. Something colder than regret. The way air feels in a room just after someone has left it present but empty, as if the warmth went out the door. I told myself I was being dramatic. Leo was 23 years old and starting a business. This was a good thing. This was what the money was for. I folded the feeling away and went inside to start packing boxes. That Friday evening, while I was sitting alone in my winery office going over interior sketches for the house in the hills, my son was 50 miles south in a part of Los Angeles where the streetlights flicker, and the only thing louder than the engines is the sound of money changing hands in the dark. I did not know any of this at the time. What I am telling you now is pieced together from everything I learned In the weeks that followed, from Tom, from Marcus, from a few other sources I will get to in time. But this is what happened to Leo on the night I handed him $40,000 and told myself I was investing in his future. Chloe Reyes had been in Leo's life for 4 months by then. He had met her at a bar in Silver Lake, the kind of place with no sign above the door and a line outside on weekends. She was 22, dark-haired, and carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had never once doubted that a room would rearrange itself around her. Leo was 23 and fatherless in all the ways that matter when a woman like that decides to pay attention to you. She picked him up from the apartment he shared with 2 roommates in Echo Park just after 9 that Friday night. She told him she wanted to show him something. She had been building toward this for weeks, the casual mentions of the underground racing scene. The way she described it, like an invitation to a world most people never got to see. The careful flattery about the way he handled the coupe on canyon roads. The location was a converted warehouse complex off Alameda Street in Compton. From the outside, it looked abandoned. Inside it was something else entirely. Banks of LED lights in blue and white. The smell of tire rubber and engine oil and whatever people drink when they are watching other people risk things. A crowd pressed along the painted barriers, phones out, voices loud. Leo had never seen anything like it. That was the point. Chloe guided him through the crowd, with one hand, light on his arm, nodding to people she clearly knew, stopping twice to exchange words with men who looked at Leo the way you look at something whose value you are trying to assess. She brought him to a man standing near the far end of the main track, apart from the crowd watching everything with the still expression of someone who never has to push to be at the center of a room. Dominic Mercer was 45 years old and built like someone who had been large his whole life and decided to make it work for him. He wore a charcoal vest over a black shirt, no tie sleeves rolled to the forearm. He shook Leo's hand with the grip of a man who wants you to remember that he shook your hand. "Chloe's been telling me about you," Dom said. His voice was low, and even the kind that does not rise to make a point. "She says you can drive." "I get by," Leo said. Dom smiled. "Just barely." "Modest. I appreciate that." He nodded toward the track. "We've got a slot open in 40 minutes. You interested?" Leo looked at Chloe. She gave him a small, certain nod, the kind that says, "I already know how this ends, and it ends well for you." The coupe was already there. My coupe. The one registered under my name, the one I had co-signed the financing on, because Leo said he needed reliable transportation, and I said yes, because I always said yes. It had been brought down earlier that evening by someone Leo assumed was doing him a favor. He did not know that the car had already been in a service bay 2 hours before he arrived. Leo put in $40,000, every cent I had transferred to him that morning. Chloe handled the paperwork calm as a woman filing her taxes, and Dom accepted it without counting, which should have told Leo something, but did not. The race itself lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Leo told me later that he felt strong through the first 3 quarters, the engine responsive, the car tracking the way he expected, the gap between him and the other driver closing. Then he hit the braking zone before the final curve at 83 miles per hour, and the pedal gave him about 60% of what it should have. He lost the rear end, corrected, lost 2 car lengths, crossed the line second. The crowd noise dropped off the way it does when an outcome has already been decided by people who knew what the outcome was going to be. Dom was waiting near the finish line with his hands in his pockets. He did not gloat. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at Leo with an expression of mild professional satisfaction and said, "Tough break." Chloe was standing 4 feet behind Dom's left shoulder. Leo turned to look at her. She met his eyes for exactly 1 second. then looked down at her phone. That was the moment he told me later. Not the crash, not the debt, not the conversation that followed. That 1 second when Chloe looked down at her phone. The paperwork Dom placed on the hood of the coupe was 2 pages single-spaced. $85,000, the original 40+ interest, calculated at a rate that would have been criminal in any transaction that could see the inside of a courtroom. Payable within 72 hours. Leo's hands were shaking so badly when he signed that his signature looked like a different person's name. Dom folded the document and placed it in the inside pocket of his vest. He straightened his cuffs. He looked at Leo with something that might have passed for sympathy if you did not look at his eyes. "Smart kid," Dom said. "Go get me the rest." Leo looked back once as Chloe walked away beside Dom, her shoulder almost touching his arm, her phone still in her hand. The warehouse lights hummed above them. The crowd had already moved on to the next conversation. My son drove north on the 110, with $40,000 gone, and $85,000 owed, and the particular kind of cold that comes from understanding too late that the warmth you thought you felt was never directed at you. I heard them before I saw them. 5:15 in the morning and something hit my front door hard enough to rattle the frame. Not a knock. A fist. The kind that does not ask permission. I had been half awake already the way you are at 60 when sleep gets shallow and the quiet of an almost empty house sits on your chest. I pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt and came down the stairs with my coffee mug still in my hand out of pure habit, and I opened the door. Leo looked like he had not slept. His shirt was the same one from the day before, collar damp with sweat, and his eyes had that blown-out quality that comes from adrenaline wearing off and leaving nothing behind. Chloe stood 1 step behind him, arms crossed, phone in her hand, looking at the middle distance like she was already bored by whatever was about to happen. "I need to talk to you," Leo said. "You're talking to me," I said. He pushed past me into the house. Chloe followed without being invited. I closed the door and turned around. The living room was half-dismantled boxes stacked against every wall, lamp shades wrapped in newspaper, the furniture pushed toward the center to make room for packing. Leo paced between 2 stacks of boxes like the walls were closing in on him. "I need money," he said. "From the house sale. I need it today." I set my mug down on a box. "What happened to the 40,000? He stopped pacing. His jaw worked like he was trying to find a different version of the answer. "Leo." My voice came out flat and quiet, in a way that had always meant I was not going to ask twice. "It's tied up," he said. "In the business. It's complicated, I just need—" "Leo, just tell him about the race." Chloe's voice was crisp and bore the tone of someone who finds other people's discomfort mildly inconvenient. She did not look up from her phone. "We don't have time for this." The room went very still. I looked at her. Then I looked back at my son. Leo's face had gone the color of old concrete. "What race?" I said. It was not a question. What came out of Leo over the next 10 minutes was not a confession so much as a collapse. The underground circuit in Compton. The 40,000 on a single bet. The car, my car, the one I had co-signed, losing in the final curve. The debt. $85,000 owed to a man named Dominic Mercer, due in 72 hours. I stood by the kitchen doorway and listened to every word without moving. When he finished, the house was quiet except for the sound of Leo's uneven breathing and the distant noise of a garbage truck 2 streets over starting its Friday route. "No," I said. Leo blinked. "What?" "No, I'm not giving you the money from the house." The color came back into his face fast and wrong, not relief, not gratitude, but something hotter than either. Dad, these people are not messing around. They will come after me. If I don't pay by tomorrow night, then you should have thought about that before you lied to me about the shop. Are you serious right now? His voice cracked upward. I'm your son. I'm standing here telling you I'm in trouble and you're going to... I worked 40 years for that money, Leo. I kept my voice level. It cost me something to do it. I will not hand it to a casino with wheels. Chloe uncrossed her arms and took one slow step forward. She looked at me directly for the first time since she had walked through my door, and her expression was the most honest thing about her flat and calculating with a professional patience underneath it. Sir, she said, with all due respect, if he doesn't pay Dominic by tomorrow night, this stops being just Leo's problem. I looked at her for a long moment, at the steadiness in her eyes, at the way she had said Dominic familiar and easy like a colleague's name. Get her out of my house, I said to Leo. Dad. Now, Leo. Leo turned to Chloe. Something passed between them, quick and wordless, and Chloe pulled back half a step, though she did not leave. She moved toward the hallway and leaned against the wall phone, back up, waiting. Leo stepped closer to me, dropping his voice. You don't understand what Dom does to people who don't pay. I need you to help me. That's it. Just this once. I looked at my son. At the desperation in his face, which was real. At the fear underneath it, which was also real. And at something else beneath both of those things, an assumption so deep he probably could not even see it himself. The assumption that I would bend, that I always bent, that the word no from me was just the first move in a negotiation that ended with him getting what he came for. Just this once, I repeated quietly. Leo nodded, urgent. I picked up my coffee mug from the top of the box. I've heard that before, I said. Go home, Leo. His face changed then. The desperation did not leave it shifted, rearranged itself into something with harder edges. He looked at Chloe against the wall. She lifted her chin almost imperceptibly. When Leo turned back to me, his eyes were different. Not the eyes of a frightened son anymore. I recognized the look, though I had never seen it on his face before. I had seen it on the faces of men who had run out of other options and decided that the only one left belonged to someone else. Leo moved first, not toward the door, toward me. He closed the distance between us in 3 steps, and I did not move back, because I have never in my life moved back from my own son, and because some part of me still believed, right up until the moment it stopped being possible to believe, that he would stop. He did not stop. The punch caught me on the left side of my mouth. Full force closed fist, the kind of impact that does not feel like pain immediately. It feels like a door slamming shut somewhere inside your skull. My boots lost the floor. I went back into the stack of moving boxes behind me, and then down the cardboard, collapsing my shoulder, hitting the hardwood, and then the back of my head, and then everything went briefly white and ringing. I lay on my back on the floor of my own living room and stared up at the water stain on the ceiling I had been meaning to fix for 11 years. Something small and hard skittered across the floor near my face. My tooth. I heard Chloe make a sharp sound, not distress, more like surprise at a miscalculation. I heard Leo's breathing ragged and too fast, the breathing of a man who has just done something his body understood before his mind did. I did not yell. I did not reach for my phone. I pressed my left palm flat against the hardwood and concentrated on breathing through the blood pooling behind my lip. Slow and deliberate, the way you breathe when you are trying to keep yourself from doing something you cannot take back. The side door off the kitchen opened. Marcus Webb had been with me for 15 years. He was 48 years old, broad across the shoulders, and had a face that did not show much under ordinary circumstances. He came in the way he always came in on Sunday mornings, clipboard under one arm, keys in hand there, to pick up the winery storage keys before I left for the week. He stopped in the doorway. He took in the overturned boxes. Chloe pressed against the far wall. Leo, standing in the center of the room, with his fists still half closed at his sides, staring down at me on the floor, with an expression I can only describe as a man watching himself from a very long distance away. Marcus did not say anything. He did not have to. His presence alone changed the temperature of the room. Leo looked at Chloe. Chloe was already moving toward the front door, handbag pulled tight against her body. Whatever calculation she had made, the answer had changed the moment a witness walked in. Leo. Her voice was quiet and final. A door closing. Leo looked at me one more time. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then he turned and followed her, and the front door opened and shut, and their footsteps crossed the porch fast, and his engine started, and then the street was quiet again. Marcus crossed the room and crouched down beside me. Arthur. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. I could see them as he reached toward me, slightly unsteady at the knuckles. Can you hear me? I can hear you fine, I said. My voice came out thicker than I expected. I turned my head and looked at the floor. The tooth had come to rest near the leg of the coffee table, small and white and ordinary, like something that had no business being outside a person's mouth. I reached over and picked it up, held it in my palm. Marcus had his phone out. I'm calling, don't. I closed my fingers around the tooth. Arthur, you're bleeding. I know. I pressed my right hand against the floor and pushed myself up to sitting. My head swam for 3 seconds, then steadied. Help me up. We're going to the hospital. I looked at him. You drive. Marcus put his phone away. He got one arm under mine and brought me to my feet with the careful efficiency of a man who understood that some situations required action and not conversation. I stood in my half-packed living room, hand pressed to my mouth, the tooth still in my other fist. The boxes were everywhere. Sandra's last kitchen calendar was still thumbtacked to the wall near the doorway, 3 months out of date. I looked at it for a moment. Then I looked down at my closed hand, at the tooth inside it, and I made a decision that had nothing to do with rage, and everything to do with the cold, clean clarity that sometimes follows the worst moment of your life. I was not going to call the police. Not yet. Not like this. I had something else in mind. The emergency room at Huntington Hospital smelled the way all emergency rooms smell, antiseptic and recycled air, and the particular flatness of fluorescent light that makes everyone look like a slightly worse version of themselves. Marcus had wanted to come in. I told him to go home. He argued for about 30 seconds, which was longer than I expected, and then he nodded and drove away because Marcus has always understood the difference between support and intrusion. The triage nurse looked at my mouth and moved me through quickly. I told the attending physician I had lost my footing on the stairs while moving boxes. He was a tired man in his late 40s, who had seen enough on a Sunday morning to know when not to ask follow-up questions. He cleaned the wound, put 4 stitches in my lower lip, confirmed 2 teeth were gone and a 3rd was cracked, and told me to see a dentist within 48 hours. I paid the bill in cash at the front desk, $840. I did not touch my insurance card. I had my reasons. They put me in a room at the end of a long hallway to wait for the paperwork. The walls were pale blue. The bed crinkled every time I shifted my weight. I sat on the edge of it with my hands on my knees and looked at the floor. Leo was 12 years old when Sandra died. I have thought about that age a lot over the years, 12. Old enough to understand what was happening. Too young to know what to do with it. He sat beside her hospital bed in those last days with his hands folded in his lap like he was trying to take up as little space as possible, as if grief had a size, and he was trying to keep his manageable. After she was gone, I threw myself back into the winery the way I always threw myself into work, completely, and without looking up. I told myself I was providing. I told myself that stability was the same thing as presence. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about it for 11 years, and I never once stopped to check. Every time Leo stumbled, I wrote a check. Every time he needed a safety net, I became one. I thought I was loving him. I was actually teaching him that falling had no consequences, because I would always be standing at the bottom, arms out, ready to catch whatever he dropped. Sandra would have said something. She had a way of saying difficult things in a voice so calm, it took you a full minute to realize you had been corrected. I used to think I would give anything to hear that voice again, sitting in that hospital room with 4 stitches in my lip and my son's debt riding somewhere in the city. I was no longer certain that was true. Because if she were here, she would be looking at me right now with that calm voice in her eyes, and I would have to admit that I had spent 11 years undoing something she would never have allowed to be done in the first place. I stayed in that room a long time. Then I took my phone out of my jacket pocket and opened the Find My app. The coupe registered under my name, bought for Leo's 21st birthday, co-signed, titled in my name, because I had enough experience with young men and expensive cars to know how that math usually worked out. The GPS signal was active. I expanded the map. East LA, a street I recognized. I typed the cross-reference into Google Maps, and the result came back in 3 seconds. Tom Briggs Auto Repair. Tom had been working on cars in that neighborhood for 30 years. He had worked on my vehicles for 20 of them. He was also the only mechanic Leo used because I had recommended him, and because Leo had never bothered to find anyone else when something already worked. I stared at the blue pin on the map for a moment. The car had gone to Tom's garage after the race, which meant the car had been there before. And if Tom had seen it enough times to notice something, I stood up from the examination table. The paper crinkled one last time, and then went still. I buttoned my jacket over the hospital bracelet I had not yet removed. I picked up my phone. I looked at the address on the screen. I had been sitting in this room feeling the weight of 11 years of wrong decisions. I was done sitting. Before I tell you what Tom found inside that car, something that changed everything I thought I knew about that night in Compton, drop the number 6 in the comments right now. That single number tells me you're still here and still with me. A note before we continue this story weaves in fictional elements to bring the message to life. If that is not the kind of storytelling you are looking for, this is a good moment to step away, no hard feelings at all. Tom Briggs was already pulling up the garage door when I turned into the lot at 7 in the morning. He was 62 years old, built like a man who had spent 4 decades lifting things that did not want to be lifted. And he had a face that processed information without advertising it. He saw my truck. He saw my lip. He held up 2 fingers toward the coffee maker inside without saying a word. I followed him in. Tom Briggs Auto Repair had been in the same location on Cesar Chavez Avenue for 31 years. The walls were hung with hand-labeled parts, boxes and faded manufacturer calendars, and a photograph of Tom shaking hands with someone in a racing jacket that I had never asked about. It smelled like motor oil and burnt coffee and the specific kind of honest work that does not need to explain itself. He handed me a mug. I took it. "The coupe's in Bay 3, he said. "It came in last night around midnight. Guy who dropped it off wasn't Leo." I looked at him. "Who was it?" "Didn't get a name. Young guy paid cash for an overnight slot, left without waiting for a receipt." Tom picked up his own mug. I've seen him before. He's been the one dropping that car off the last few times. How many times has the car been here? 3 times in 4 months. He said it the way you say something you have been waiting to say. Come look at it. Bay 3 was at the back of the garage, past 2 older sedans up on lifts. The coupe sat low under the fluorescent lights, its black finish picking up the yellow glare. Tom crouched beside the front left wheel well and pointed. "Brake line," he said. "Right here. You see that crimp?" I crouched beside him. The metal line had a slight deformation near the junction point, subtle enough that you would not notice it. Checking the car before a race significant enough to matter at high speed. Partial restriction, Tom said. Not enough to feel at street speed. But if you're pushing past 80 and you need to brake hard into a corner, he made a short, flat gesture with one hand. You get maybe 60% of what you're asking for. Enough to lose control of a race. Not enough to cause a crash that looks like anything other than driver error. He stood up and moved to the engine bay. Shot fuel injector on cylinder 3. He pointed to a component near the center of the engine block. Restricted. Car loses about 18% power output at full throttle. Again, noticeable if you know what you're feeling for. Not noticeable if you're 23 years old and you've been told you're driving the best car in the field. I stood there looking at the engine for a moment. Tom, I said. Who does this kind of work? Somebody who knows engines. He closed the hood with a careful, deliberate motion. This isn't amateur work, Arthur. Whoever did this knew exactly which components to touch and how far to take it. They wanted the car to lose. They did not want it to crash. He looked at me steadily. There's a difference. One is sabotage. The other is murder. These people knew which one they were doing. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug. When was the first modification made? I asked. Tom walked back to the workbench and pulled up a handwritten service log, the kind he had kept in paper ledgers since before anyone used tablets for anything. He ran his finger down a column of dates. First time this car came in showing signs of interference. He stopped, looked up at me, then back down at the page. Arthur, this was done 3 days before you transferred money to Leo. The garage was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck downshifted on Cesar Chavez, and the sound rolled through the open bay door and faded. 3 days before, I said. Tom nodded. I thought about Leo sitting on my front steps the morning after the race, telling me the business had come together fast. The opportunity was right there. He just needed the capital. I thought about the easy confidence in his voice. I thought about Chloe standing behind him, already knowing exactly how the conversation was going to go. The $40,000 had never been for a shop on Melrose. It had been the bet. And the bet had been arranged before Leo ever walked up my porch steps and asked for it. I set my mug down on Tom's workbench. This was never about Leo, I said. The words came out quiet and certain the way things do when you have stopped being surprised and started being clear. This was about me. Tom said nothing. He did not need to. I took out my phone and found Elena Morse in my contacts. She picked up on the second ring. I need everything you can find on a man named Dominic Mercer, I said. And Elena, I need to know how far back this goes. I left Tom's garage at 8:30 and drove back toward Pasadena with the windows down and the radio off. By the time I reached the winery, Marcus was already there running through the morning inventory, the way he did every Monday, clipboard in one hand, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked up when I came through the side door and did not comment on the bandaging on my lip, which was either professionalism or the knowledge that I would tell him what he needed to know when I was ready to tell him. I closed the office door behind us and told him what Tom had found. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he set the clipboard down on the desk and was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who had nothing to say, but the quiet of someone deciding how much of what they had to say was ready to come out. "I need you to find Chloe Reyes today," I said. "Follow her. Don't approach her, don't make contact. Just find out where she goes and who she meets. Take photos if you can do it without being seen." Marcus nodded slowly. Then he said, "Arthur, there's something I should have told you sooner." I looked at him. About 6 weeks ago, I was locking up the east gate late, maybe 8 o'clock. There was a car parked on the service road just outside the property line. A man was standing beside it, looking toward the barrel room. He paused. I didn't think much of it at the time. People pull over on that road sometimes. But the way he was standing, he wasn't lost. He was looking at something specific. You get a look at him, from about 40 yards. Good enough to see his face. Marcus picked up the clipboard again, not because he needed it, but because he needed something to hold. I didn't say anything because I wasn't certain. I'm still not 100% certain. But when you said the name Dominic Mercer just now, he stopped. Say it, Marcus. The man on the service road looked like him. The office went very still. I turned to the window and looked out at the barrel room, the long wooden structure where 30 years of fermentation knowledge lived in the walls and the floors and the particular smell of oak and thyme. Dom had been standing outside it 6 weeks ago, looking at it the way you look at something you intend to take apart. You should have told me, I said. Yes, Marcus said. I should have. There was nothing more to say about that, so I did not say it. Marcus left to find Chloe. He called me at 4:45 that afternoon. Western Avenue, he said. Korean restaurant on the corner, second booth from the back. She's been here 40 minutes. Who's with her? A man. 50s gray vest sat down 15 minutes after she did. A pause. Arthur, it's him. I'm close enough to be sure this time. It's the same man from the service road. Get photos. Already done. I was sitting in my truck in the winery parking lot when the images came through 8 photographs taken from a corner table angle clear enough to read the expression on both faces. Chloe and Dom in a restaurant booth, a thick envelope on the table between them. Chloe counting the contents with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this before. I enlarged Dom's face on the screen. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a door I had not known was closed began to open. I knew that face. Not from Leo's racing scene, not from anything recent. From somewhere older than that. Something connected to the winery, to an earlier chapter of this place. A name attached to a problem I thought I had dealt with and put behind me. I called Elena. The photos are coming through now, I said. The man with Chloe, his name is Dominic Mercer. I need his full background. Father's name, employment history, any connection to Vance Artisan Winery going back 15 years. I paused. And Elena, come to my office tonight. I think I already know what you're going to find. I need to hear you say it out loud. She was quiet for 2 seconds. I'll be there at 9. I set the phone down on the passenger seat and sat looking at Dom's face on the screen. Whatever this was, it did not start last Friday. It started a long time ago. Before I reveal the name behind all of this, the person who set this entire thing in motion 12 years before that Friday in September, I need to know you are still with me. Leave the word justice in the comments right now. One word. That is all. And a quick note, some details in what follows are fictional shaped for the purpose of this story. If you would rather not continue, this is your moment to step away, and I completely understand. Elena's office on the 28th floor looked different at 9 o'clock at night. During the day, it was all clean lines and controlled light, and the particular authority of a space designed to make clients feel that their problems were manageable. At night, with the city spread out below the windows, and only the desk lamp on it felt like the inside of something that had been thinking very hard for a long time. She did not offer me coffee. She pulled a chair around to my side of the desk, instead sat down with a folder across her knees, and looked at me the way she looks at you when she is about to say something that is going to cost you something to hear. Dominic Mercer, she said. 45 years old. 2 prior arrests for operating illegal gambling enterprises in Los Angeles County, 2016-2019. Neither went to trial. Witnesses declined to testify both times. She opened the folder. His father was Vincent Mercer. I heard the name land somewhere deep and old inside me. Vincent worked for you for 3 years, Elena continued. 2010 through 2013. Winery operations, barrel storage, inventory management. You terminated him in October of 2013 and filed a police report the same day. He was stealing, I said. Premium grape stock. Selling it to a competitor in Temecula. It took me 8 months to catch it because he was careful and I trusted him. I paused. I gave him 3 chances before I called the police. I don't know why I'm saying that. Because it matters to you, Elena said. It doesn't change the outcome. Vincent Mercer had been convicted of grand theft under California Penal Code 487, 9 months in county jail. Released after 6 on good behavior. The family lost their house in Fontana 4 months after his arrest. Vincent died of liver failure 2 years after his release. Dom was 19 when his father was arrested, Elena said. He dropped out of his 2nd year at Cal State Long Beach that semester. I thought about a 19-year-old kid watching a police car take his father away from a building with my name on the sign out front. I thought about what that kind of thing does to a person if they let it calcify over 12 years instead of moving through it. The timing, I said. Elena nodded. The winery's Napa property sale became a matter of public record in July. 3 weeks later, Chloe Reyes made contact with Leo at a bar in Silver Lake. She closed the folder. Dom didn't stumble onto your son, Arthur. He waited for a transaction large enough to hurt you, and then he built a mechanism to intercept it. The city outside the window did its indifferent nighttime business lights, moving signals, changing a helicopter somewhere, tracking something. What are my options? I asked. Legally, the gambling debt has no standing in California court. The car tampering is criminal California Penal Code 594 felony vandalism, potentially more depending on how a DA frames intent. She paused. But there's another angle. I have a contact at LAPD Organized Crime Division, Detective Dana Cole. She's been building a file on underground racing networks in the county for over a year. If Dom's operation has the structure I think it does, then it's bigger than Leo's debt. Significantly. I want to send her what we have tonight. The photographs Marcus took, Tom's service report. It won't move fast, these investigations take time, but it puts Dom in a system that is much larger and more patient than either of us. I looked at the folder in her hands. Do it, I said. Send her everything. I stood up. And Elena, I'm going to handle the immediate problem myself. Dom needs to believe he still has the upper hand for a little while longer. Elena looked at me steadily. How long is a little while? 4 days, I said. Maybe 5? She considered that. I won't ask. Good, I said. Because I wouldn't tell you. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. At the door I stopped and turned back, Vincent Mercer, I said. When I fired him, I told him I was sorry it had come to that. I meant it. I looked at Elena. His son spent 12 years turning that apology into a weapon. I don't know what to do with that. Elena held my gaze. You don't have to do anything with it tonight, she said. Tonight, you just have to get some sleep. I left her there with the city behind her, and the folder on her desk, and the call to Dana Cole she was already composing in her head. The new house was empty in the way that only unfurnished rooms can be. Not just without furniture, but without the accumulated weight of time that makes a space feel inhabited. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood. The windows were uncovered, and the city lights from the valley below came through faint and distant like something that was happening to someone else. I had brought one folding chair, one lamp, and 3 boxes from the moving truck. 2 of the boxes held files I needed for the winery transition. The third I had been carrying from house to house for 11 years without opening. Sandra's handwriting was on the side of it in black marker. Personal. SV. I set it in the center of the empty living room floor and sat down in the folding chair and looked at it for a while. Then I got up and opened it. There were photographs, our wedding, Leo's first birthday, a summer at a lake in Oregon I had half forgotten. A string of wooden prayer beads she had kept on her nightstand. 3 paperback novels with the spines cracked from reading. A small velvet pouch of things I did not open. And at the bottom, beneath everything else, a white envelope with my name on it. Arthur. Just that. Her handwriting, which had gotten slightly unsteady toward the end, but was still entirely hers. I sat back down in the folding chair and held the envelope for a long time before I opened it. The letter was 2 pages, written on the yellow legal pad paper she always used for anything she considered serious. Arthur, if you're reading this, it means you finally opened the boxes. That's okay. I always knew it would take you a while. I need to say something I didn't say well enough out loud, and I'm sorry it's coming to you this way, instead of across the kitchen table where it belonged. I'm worried about Leo. Not about whether he'll be okay, he will, because he's ours, and we built him tough even when we didn't mean to. I'm worried about how okay he'll be, and I think you know what I mean by that. You love him so much that you can't stand to see him hurt. I know that feeling. I have that feeling every single day. But Arthur, love that never lets anyone fall isn't love. It's a ceiling with good intentions. At some point, he has to learn that the ground exists. Let him struggle. Let him fail at something real. And when he does, and he will, because we all do, don't catch him before he hits the ground. Catch him after. That's the difference. That's the whole thing. I know this isn't what you want to hear. I know you'll want to argue with me about it. I'm writing it down so you can't. I love you both more than I know how to say. Take care of my garden. Sandra. I read it twice. Then I folded it along its original creases and held it in my hands without moving for a long time. Outside, the valley lights shifted and blurred in that particular way they do when your eyes stop focusing on anything specific. I thought about Leo at 12 years old, sitting beside her hospital bed with his hands folded in his lap. I thought about every check I had written, every loan I had absorbed, every time I had stood at the bottom and held out my arms so the fall would not leave a mark. I thought about him standing in my living room 3 days ago, with his fist still closed at his side, looking down at me on the floor. Sandra had seen it coming. She had been gone 11 years, and she had still managed to be right about the thing I had spent 11 years getting wrong. I stood up from the folding chair. My knees ached the way they always did, now a low, persistent reminder that 60 is not 50, and 50 was not 40. And time moves in one direction, regardless of what you think you deserve. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark yard below, bare soil, no plantings, nothing but the shape of what a garden could be. Take care of my garden. I took out my phone. I opened a message to Marcus. Tomorrow I need Ray Donovan's address. The property that sold 3 months ago next door to this one. Find out what you can before 9. I sent it and set the phone down on the windowsill. I placed Sandra's letter in the inside pocket of my jacket close to my chest. Not in a box, not in a drawer. I was going to need to remember what she said in the days ahead, and I did not trust myself to remember anything right now that was not written down and kept close. I turned off the lamp. In the dark of the empty house with the city below and Sandra's words against my chest and the bare yard waiting outside the window, I finally understood what I had to do. Not to punish Leo. To finish what Sandra started. The house next door to mine was older than the one I had just bought, same hillside, same view of the valley, but the architecture had the settled confidence of a structure that had been exactly where it wanted to be for a long time. Stone facade. Heavy front door. A garden in the side yard that someone tended with serious attention. I rang the bell at 9 in the morning with 3 cases of Vance Reserve on a hand truck behind me. The man who opened the door was 68 years old and looked like someone had compressed a larger person into a slightly smaller frame without losing any of the original weight. Gray at the temples, dark eyes that processed information without broadcasting the results. He wore a plain white shirt with the sleeves rolled to the forearm and looked at me the way you look at someone you have been expecting to show up eventually. "Mr. Vance," he said. "Mr. Donovan," I said. "I apologize for the weekday visit." He looked at the hand truck behind me. "Coastal Select has been sending me your reserve for 6 years. I always wondered about the man who made it." He stepped back from the door. "Come in." We sat on the rear terrace overlooking the canyon. He poured 2 glasses from one of the bottles I had brought, not asking, just opening it, and handed one across the table. The morning was clear, and the air smelled of sage and warm stone. "You're here about the Mercer boy," he said. I looked at him. "I make it my business to know what happens on streets near mine," he said without apology. "Your son owes Dominic Mercer $85,000 from an illegal racing operation in Compton. The principal was $40,000. The rest is interest calculated at a rate that would be prosecutable if the underlying debt had any legal standing, which it doesn't." He sipped his wine. "Under California law, a debt arising from unlicensed gambling cannot be enforced in any civil court. Dom knows this. The interest rate is not about money. It is about keeping people afraid." "I know what it's about," I said. Ray nodded. "Then you also know that coming to me means you've decided not to handle this through official channels." "I'm handling it through official channels on a separate track," I said. "What I need from you is simpler. I need the interest stripped and the principal marked as settled. I need Leo's name off whatever ledger Dom keeps." Ray turned his glass slowly on the table. "Why would I do that?" "Because Dom has been operating in this area for 3 years, without acknowledging anyone's territory but his own." I kept my voice even. "That's a professional discourtesy. And because the wine in your glass is worth considerably more than whatever Dom has contributed to your quality of life." Something moved at the corner of Ray's mouth that was not quite a smile. He looked out at the canyon for a moment, then back at me. "The 3 cases you brought," he said, "are yours regardless of what you decide?" "I know." He set his glass down. "Dominic Mercer has been an irritant for longer than your son's situation. You've given me a reason that is easier to explain than the real one." He folded his hands on the table. "I'll make a call this afternoon. Leo's debt will be closed by tomorrow morning, principal and interest both. You won't hear from Dom about this again." I appreciate that. Don't. His voice was flat and direct. This is not generosity. This is maintenance. He picked up his glass again. The wine, on the other hand, is generosity. This is excellent. I stood up to leave. Ray remained seated, looking at the canyon with the easy stillness of a man who had learned that most things come to you if you sit still long enough. One question, he said, without turning around. I stopped. Your son. He paused. What happens to him when this is over? I thought about Sandra's letter in my jacket pocket. I thought about the folding chair in the empty house next door, and the bare yard below the window, and the 11 years of catching Leo before he hit the ground. He goes to work, I said, with his hands, for wages, and he figures out the rest himself. Ray was quiet for a moment. My father made me unload trucks at his warehouse every summer from the time I was 14, he said. I hated him for it until I was about 35. He turned and looked at me then directly for the first time since we sat down. Then I understood. I nodded. Good luck, Mr. Vance, he said. I took the hand truck and walked back around the side of the house to the driveway. The morning was warming up, and the sage smell was stronger now, the kind of dry California morning that feels like it has been going on forever and will go on forever after you are gone. I had one more thing to arrange before the week was out. Dom called at 10 Thursday morning. His voice was different from what I expected, measured, professional, with none of the menace I had been bracing for. Whatever Ray had said to him the previous afternoon had rearranged something in his posture that carried through even over the phone. I understand you want to discuss a resolution, he said. I have a proposal, I said. Come to my winery at 2 o'clock. We can talk in person. He arrived exactly on time, which told me something. Men who are accustomed to keeping others waiting do not arrive exactly on time unless they need something. I met him in the winery parking lot. He was taller than I expected from Marcus's photographs, broad through the chest, moving with the deliberate ease of someone who had learned that stillness projects more authority than motion. He wore the gray vest again. He looked at me with an expression that had been carefully emptied of anything readable. Mr. Vance, he said. Mr. Mercer, I said. We shook hands. His grip was firm and brief and told me nothing. I walked him into the barrel room, not the office, not a conference table. The barrel room where the air is cool and the light is low, and 60-gallon American oak barrels line the walls from floor to ceiling. I wanted him on my ground, surrounded by what I had built, so there was no confusion about who understood what in this room. 5 cases, I said. Vance Reserve Single Barrel. The 2019 vintage. It doesn't go to retail. We allocate it exclusively to private clients and a handful of restaurants. I watched his face. In exchange, you return the coupe and the debt instrument Leo signed. Clean. No copies, no outstanding claims. Dom looked at the barrels on the wall. He was doing math, the market value of 5 cases of limited release single barrel. The value of the debt. The value of Ray's continued goodwill. I could see him working through it. Patricia Harrington is hosting a dinner in Beverly Hills on Friday night, he said. 30 guests, investment and real estate, the kind of room where the right bottle makes an impression. I knew Patricia. She had been buying from the winery for 8 years, one of the first accounts I had built in the city, back when Vance Reserve was still finding its audience. I made a mental note. The Reserve would make an impression, I said. Dom nodded. Done. Marcus brought the coupe around from the side lot, where we had parked it after Tom returned it earlier that week. Dom's man, a quiet, heavy-set individual who had waited by the truck without being introduced, handed over the debt instrument without ceremony. I unfolded it, confirmed Leo's signature, and put it in my jacket pocket next to Sandra's letter. The 5 cases went into Dom's truck. Before his man closed the tailgate, I stopped him. "The storage temperature for the reserve is critical," I said, addressing Dom directly. "Below 65 degrees Fahrenheit. If it gets warm, a car trunk, a room without climate control, the secondary fermentation can reactivate. You'll end up with sediment and off flavors within 48 hours. It won't be undrinkable, but it won't be what your guests are expecting." Dom looked at me. "We'll keep it cold." "Good," I said. We shook hands again. He got in the truck and drove south. Marcus and I watched the truck until it turned onto the main road and disappeared. "You told him," Marcus said. "I told him," I said. Marcus looked at me sideways. "And if he doesn't listen," I looked at the empty space where the truck had been. Dom had spent 12 years building a plan to take something from me. He had used my son as the mechanism and assumed I would not see it coming and would not know what to do when I did. He had looked at an old winemaker and seen someone who could be outmaneuvered by a man in an expensive vest. "Then he doesn't listen," I said. "And Friday night goes the way Friday night goes." I called Tom Briggs from the parking lot and told him the coupe was ready to be sold. Tom knew a buyer, a collector in Glendale, who had been looking for that model for 2 years. $14,000 cash transaction paperwork transferred within the week. I told Tom to deduct his finder's fee and put the rest toward what Leo owed me. $26,000 remaining. Payable in labor. Marcus went back inside to finish the afternoon inventory. I stood in the parking lot for a while longer, looking at the barrel room through the open door, the rows of oak, the slow, dark work of time turning raw material into something worth keeping. I thought about Dom at a dinner table in Beverly Hills on Friday night, pouring wine he had been warned about into glasses held by people who would know immediately that something was wrong. I thought about Patricia Harrington's face. I went inside to call her. "Patricia," I said when she answered. "It's Arthur Vance. I need to give you some advance information about Friday evening." Marcus and I closed the winery at 6 and stayed. There was no particular reason to stay, except that neither of us wanted to be somewhere else. I made a pot of coffee in the back office, and we sat at the work table with the door open to the barrel room, and the smell of oak and thyme came through on the cool evening air, and we did not talk much. At 7:15, Marcus said, "You think he kept it cold?" "No," I said. Marcus nodded and looked at his coffee. The call came at 8:47. Patricia Harrington's voice was the kind of controlled that takes effort to maintain. "Arthur, I need to understand something before this evening goes any further." "Tell me what's happening," I said. "A man named Dominic Mercer arrived tonight with 5 cases of what he described as Vance Reserve, provided as a gift from your winery. He presented himself as your distribution partner." A pause. "Arthur, the wine is wrong. The color is cloudy and there is a sour smell coming off every bottle we've opened. 3 of my guests have already put their glasses down." I kept my voice steady and let the right amount of concern come through. "Patricia, I need you to listen carefully. Those bottles were not sent by this winery, and Dominic Mercer has no affiliation with Vance Artisan in any capacity. The wine you're describing sounds like it was improperly stored. Secondary fermentation can reactivate if the temperature isn't controlled. Whatever he brought you, it is not a product we would release." Silence on her end. The kind that means someone is recalibrating quickly. "I see," she said. "I'm sorry this happened at your table. If you'll allow me, I'd like to send 2 proper cases to your home next week as an apology for the confusion, though the confusion is entirely his, not ours." "That's very gracious," Patricia said. Her voice had gone flat and decisive in the way it does when a woman of her standing has finished being surprised and started being angry on behalf of her guests. "I'll handle things from here." She ended the call. Marcus was watching me from across the work table. I set the phone down and picked up my coffee. "Done," he said. "Done," I said. We sat there for another few minutes. Outside the open door, the barrel room was dark, except for the low security light at the far end, and the rows of oak curved away into the shadow like something patient and permanent. At 9:20, Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, then turned it toward me. A post from an account. He had been monitoring one of the guests at the Harrington dinner, a woman with 11,000 followers, who photographed everything she ate and drank and apparently felt strongly about being given inferior wine at a gathering she had dressed up for. The photograph showed a glass with a visible haze, a color that no properly made red wine should have. The caption named Dom by his full name and described him as having claimed a partnership with a Pasadena winery that had apparently not been informed of the arrangement. 2 minutes later, a second post from a different account. Then a third. By 10 o'clock, there were 7. Marcus put his phone face down on the table. 30 guests, he said. At least half of them are in finance or real estate. That's not a dinner party. That's a network. Was a network, I said. I looked out at the barrel room. 30 years of mornings. 30 years of learning what patience actually costs and what it produces. Dom had spent 12 years building toward something he thought would destroy me. He had walked into my winery on Thursday afternoon and picked up 5 cases of what he believed was a weapon and driven it straight into the room where his reputation lived. I thought about his face when he shook my hand in the parking lot. The controlled expression, the careful stillness. I wondered if he was still in the room when the first guest set her glass down, or if he had already understood by the color of the wine in the low light that something had gone very wrong. I picked up my phone and opened my contacts, scrolled to Leo's name. My thumb stopped there. 5 days since Sunday morning. 5 days since the tooth hit the floor. I had checked the Find My app twice. Leo's phone had been dead since Monday. No signal. No location. Somewhere in this city, my son was sleeping in his car or on a floor or in whatever temporary shelter, 23 years old, and no money and too much pride could produce. I looked at his name on the screen for a long moment. Then I put the phone in my pocket and stood up. "Go home, Marcus," I said. "Tomorrow's going to be busy." Marcus gathered his jacket without argument. At the door, he paused. "He'll call when he's ready," he said. "I know," I said. I turned off the office light and stood for a moment in the dark barrel room surrounded by the slow work of time, listening to the buildings settle around me. Somewhere in the city, Dom Mercer was learning what it felt like when something you built came apart in public. And somewhere else, Leo was learning something too. I just did not know yet which lesson would take. What I am about to tell you, I learned later in pieces from Leo himself. He had been sleeping in the parking lot of a Food for Less in Inglewood for 2 nights, stretched across the back seat of a car he had borrowed from a guy at the circuit who owed him a favor before he ran out of reasons to stay there. The 3rd night, he drove to a 24-hour laundromat in Hawthorne and slept in the plastic chair nearest the dryer because it was warm. The 4th night, he sat in the car again, this time outside a McDonald's on Figueroa, eating a $4 meal with money he had been rationing from the $63 he'd had in his wallet when he left my house on Sunday morning. He had not called anyone. He told me later that he had wanted to several times, but every time he reached for the phone, he thought about what he had done in my living room and put it back in his pocket. There is a particular kind of shame that makes you feel that you have forfeited the right to ask for help, even when you are desperate for it. Leo had found that place and moved into it. By Friday evening, his phone was dead. He had been carrying it like dead weight for 2 days. He was sitting at a gas station on Wilmington Avenue in Compton, the kind of station that has bars on the windows of the convenience store, and a hand-lettered sign about the ATM being out of order when a guy he recognized from the racing scene walked up to the adjacent pump. Ricky was 25, lean with the permanent squint of someone who spent a lot of time looking at things moving fast. He had been around the Compton circuit for years, not a star, just a regular. The kind of guy who knows everyone without anyone knowing him particularly well. He recognized Leo and came over with the easy friendliness of someone who did not know enough about the situation to be careful around it. "Yo, you're Leo right from the race last week." Leo looked up from the curb where he was sitting. "Yeah." Ricky leaned against the pump, arms crossed. "Tough night, man. I was watching from the barrier. You were up 3 lengths going into the last curve." He shook his head. "What happened with your brakes?" Leo went very still. "What do you mean, what happened with my brakes?" Ricky frowned. "The car was in Dom's tech bay for like 2 hours before the race. I figured they were setting it up for you." He paused, reading Leo's face. "You didn't know about that?" Leo stood up from the curb slowly, the way you stand up when your legs are not entirely sure they want to hold you. "Who took it in?" Leo said. "One of Dom's guys. The big one always wears the red cap." Ricky shrugged, uncomfortable now, starting to understand that he had handed something to someone who did not know they were about to receive it. "I thought you knew, man. I figured it was like a tune-up or whatever." Leo did not say anything for a long moment. Ricky said, "You good?" "Yeah," Leo said. "I'm good." He was not good, but he thanked Ricky and walked to the convenience store and spent 4 of his last $11 on a portable charger. The cheap kind that gives you maybe 20% battery before it dies. He sat on the curb outside and waited for the phone to come back to life, and thought about what Ricky had just told him. The car had been in Dom's tech bay before the race. 2 hours. He had not known. He had walked into that warehouse in Compton, believing he had a real chance. Believing the 40,000 was a legitimate bet on his own ability, and the whole time the outcome had already been decided by someone else's hands on his brake line. He had lost because they made him lose. He had still gone home and hit his father over it. That second fact did not go away just because the first one was true. He understood that sitting on the curb outside the gas station with the portable charger getting warm in his hand, being cheated did not make him innocent. It just made the picture larger and worse in every direction. He thought about my face when he walked in Sunday morning. He thought about the way I had looked at him across the living room, not with anger, but with something quieter and more devastating, the look of a man revising something he had believed for a long time. He walked to Chloe's apartment building on foot. 40 minutes. He did not have a plan. He just had nowhere else to go, and the particular logic of exhaustion that points you toward the last place you felt something real, even when that place has already shown you what it actually is. Her building was 3 stories, exterior walkways, the kind of place where the security gate is always propped open with a brick. He rang the buzzer for her unit twice. No answer. The lights were on in her window on the 3rd floor. He took the exterior stairs up. Her unit faced the street. The window was closed, but the sliding door to the small balcony was open, and Chloe's voice came down clearly in the night air, mixed with the voices of 2 or 3 other people inside. Leo stopped at the base of the stairs to the 3rd floor and listened. He heard his name. He heard her laughing. He heard enough. He sat down on the concrete steps and looked at his hands for a long time. The portable charger clicked off 20% exactly as promised. He plugged his phone in anyway and waited. When the screen came on, he found my name in the contacts. His thumb was shaking when he pressed call. It rang twice. "Leo," I said. He opened his mouth. What came out was not words. It was just his voice, finally, after 5 days of silence, breaking apart at the seams. "Dad," he said. "I don't know where to go." I told Leo to come to the new address and texted it to him before I left the winery. I did not sleep well. I lay in the folding chair with my jacket over me like a blanket and listened to the house settle around me and thought about my son driving through the city at midnight with $11 and a 4% battery and 5 days of bad decisions sitting on his chest. At 6:30 in the morning, Marcus knocked on the front door. He had his phone out before I finished opening it. "Tom called me at 6, he said, stepping inside. "You need to see this." The video was 43 seconds long. Shot from a corner table angle slightly low, the kind of framing that looks accidental but is not. Chloe and Dom in a restaurant booth, the Korean place on Western Avenue, recognizable by the red lanterns above the bar in the background. A thick envelope on the table. Chloe opening it, counting the bills with the practiced efficiency of someone for whom this was a routine transaction. Dom watching with the patient expression of a man reviewing work he had already approved. No audio, just the image, clean and clear and entirely sufficient. "Tom did this on his own," Marcus said. "He said he'd been carrying it around for a week, waiting to see if it was needed." I looked at the video one more time. Then I called Tom. "I figured someone should have it documented," Tom said when he answered. "That girl's been in and out of that scene too long to be doing it for fun. I posted it to 3 groups about an hour ago. Racing community, couple of local car forums." He paused. "It's moving." By 8 o'clock, it had been shared 400 times. By 9, Chloe's name was appearing in comment sections across platforms she had spent years cultivating as social currency. By 10, 3 different people had posted their own accounts of encounters with her that followed the same pattern: young men money Dom's operation losses that could never be recovered through any legitimate channel. I called Elena at 9:15. "I've already drafted the notice," she said. "Civil conspiracy under California Civil Code, co-conspirator in fraudulent inducement. I'm sending it to her last known address by courier this morning." A pause. "It won't produce immediate financial recovery. She likely has no attachable assets, but the judgment will follow her. Every background check, every lease application, every time she tries to open a bank account in this state." "Send it," I said. "Already printing," she said. At 11, Marcus got a call from someone he knew peripherally in the East LA car community. Chloe's apartment had been empty since early morning. A neighbor had seen her loading 2 large suitcases into a rideshare before 7. No forwarding address, no notice to her landlord, no goodbye to anyone. I was standing on the rear terrace of the new house when Ray Donovan called. "It's done," he said. "I spoke with Mercer last night after the Beverly Hills situation became public. He's aware that his operation no longer has any standing in this area." A pause that had the quality of something considered carefully. "He'll be moving assets. Probably already has." "How much time does he have?" I asked. "Less than he thinks," Ray said. He ended the call without elaborating, which told me everything I needed to know about what less than he thinks actually meant. I stood on the terrace and looked at the empty yard below. The bare soil, the shape of a garden that did not exist yet. Sandra's letter was still in my jacket pocket. I had not taken it out since Wednesday night. I could feel the folded edge of it against my ribs when I breathed. I thought about Chloe in a rideshare at 6:50 in the morning with 2 suitcases, watching Los Angeles go past the window, calculating what she had left and where it could take her. I did not feel satisfaction about that. I did not feel much of anything about it. Whatever she had coming, she had arranged for herself, and the machinery of it was already running without any further input from me. Tom's clip was still spreading. Elena's notice was in a courier bag somewhere on the freeway. Ray's call had lasted 41 seconds. I went inside and made coffee and sat at the kitchen counter and thought about Leo. He had called at 11:47 the previous night. I had told him to come here. He had not arrived yet, which meant he was sleeping somewhere, the car probably, and would come when he woke up. I did not rush him. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Dom's losing his people," he said. "Word's out. 3 of his regular drivers posted that they're done with the circuit." He set his phone on the counter. "It's collapsing." "It was always going to," I said. Marcus looked at me for a moment. "What do you need me to do today?" I thought about the employment agreement I had asked Elena to prepare 2 days ago. The lease on the room in Alhambra I had signed on Thursday morning, quietly before any of this week's events had resolved. The 3 months of rent I had prepaid, because I knew whatever happened, Leo was going to need somewhere to land that was not a parking lot. "Go home," I said. "Rest. Monday morning, I'm going to need you at the winery early." Marcus nodded and picked up his phone. At the door, he stopped. "He's going to be okay, Arthur." I looked at my coffee. "I know," I said. I was not entirely certain that was true, but I had learned a long time ago that some things you say out loud, because saying them is part of making them possible. This part I reconstructed from what came out later, court filing statements from people who had been in that warehouse. Things that surface when an operation collapses, and everyone inside it starts talking to save themselves. Dom received the call from Ray Donovan at 7:12 on Saturday evening. He was in the back office of the Compton warehouse at the time, behind a steel door that locked from the inside, going through the kind of paperwork that does not have a legitimate home anywhere. His phone showed Ray's number, and he looked at it for 3 full rings before answering. Ray said 4 sentences. The operation at Compton was finished. Dom had until midnight to clear his people out. Any assets on the property would be inventoried and applied against outstanding debts. "Do not make this complicated." Then Ray hung up. Dom called back twice. Both times it went to voicemail. He left no message either time because there was nothing to say that would change anything, and Dom was smart enough to know the difference between a negotiation and a closing statement. He spent 20 minutes on the phone after that, working through his contact list from the top. The first 4 people he called did not answer. The 5th answered and told him with the careful neutrality of someone who has already decided which side of a line they are standing on, that they had heard about Beverly Hills and about the clip, and that they were going to sit this one out. The 6th did not answer. The 7th told him directly that the Harrington dinner had made it into 2 industry newsletters by noon, and that his name was now attached to a product fraud story that was going to keep circulating. He drove to the warehouse floor. It was a Saturday night, which should have meant activity engines, lights, the particular electricity of money and speed moving together in a closed space. Instead, there were 11 people standing around in the low light with the aimless energy of workers who have arrived to find the job site shut down. Dom's 2 remaining regular crew members were there. Both of them looked at him when he came through the door with the expressions of people who had made their calculations already and were waiting for the formality of being officially released. "How long?" one of them asked. "Midnight," Dom said. They nodded and started moving. Dom walked the length of the warehouse slowly. The cars were already gone, 3 of them towed out earlier that afternoon by their owners who had apparently received the same news through different channels before Dom did. The equipment that remained belonged to the operation, not to individuals, and it would not be leaving with him. He stopped at the far end of the floor near the finish line marker painted on the concrete. and stood there looking back at what he had built. 12 years. He had been 19 years old, standing on a sidewalk in Fontana watching a police car pull away from the curb with his father in the back seat, and he had felt something solidify in his chest that day. Not grief, not exactly, but something harder and more durable than grief. A sense of account, of a balance that needed correcting. 12 years of building toward a single point. And an old winemaker in a flannel shirt had taken it apart in 10 days. Dom looked at the car nearest the finish line, a modified coupe that had been used to run 6 different drivers in the past year. He thought about Leo Vance at the controls, 23 years old, and absolutely convinced he had a real shot pulling out of the start position with $40,000 on the table, and the outcome already decided. He had expected to feel something when he thought about that. Satisfaction, maybe. Or at least the cold comfort of a plan executed correctly. He felt nothing. The plan was gone, and the feeling it was supposed to produce had apparently been attached to the plan. And now both of them were just weight. He walked back to the office, took what he could carry, and left the rest. His car was parked on the service road outside. He got in, started the engine, and drove north without a destination. The city went past the windows the way it always does late on a Saturday, lit up and indifferent, going about its business, entirely unaware that one particular man's 12-year project had just concluded unsuccessfully in a warehouse off Alameda Street. 2 blocks behind him, a gray sedan maintained a consistent distance without varying speed or closing the gap. Inside it, a woman in her 40s with a department-issue laptop open on the passenger seat typed a line of text and pressed send. Detective Dana Cole had been watching Dominic Mercer for 14 months. She had a folder on him that was 230 pages long and growing. She had been waiting for the right moment, not the right evidence, which she had already, but the right moment when enough of the structure around him had collapsed that there was nothing left to protect him. She watched his taillights and decided that Saturday night was close. Sunday morning would be closer. The knock came at 7:53 on Sunday morning. Not a loud knock. 3 measured strikes, evenly spaced, the kind that has been practiced enough times to carry authority without needing to announce it. I had been awake for an hour, already sitting at the kitchen counter with coffee and Sandra's letter open on the counter in front of me. I had read it again that morning, not because I had forgotten what it said, but because I wanted the words in my head before whatever the day brought. I opened the door. The woman on the step was in her early 40s, compact and precise in the way of someone who had learned to take up exactly the right amount of space in any room. Dark blazer identification already out and open before I had finished opening the door. "Mr. Vance? I'm Detective Dana Cole, LAPD Organized Crime Division. Your attorney, Elena Morse, filed a report with my unit 9 days ago." She paused. "I think it's time we talked." Elena had arrived 10 minutes earlier and was already seated at the kitchen table with her own coffee and a legal pad. She and Dana exchanged the brief professional nod of 2 people who have worked adjacent to each other long enough to know what to expect. Dana sat down across from me and placed a thin folder on the table. "I want to be straightforward with you," she said. "Dominic Mercer has been under investigation by my unit in coordination with the FBI for 14 months. What we are building is a federal case under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. The statute applies because his operation crosses county lines and constitutes an ongoing criminal enterprise with structured leadership, defined roles, and a pattern of illegal activity conducted for financial gain." She opened the folder. "We have substantial evidence already. What we needed was a direct victim willing to provide a formal statement and supporting documentation. That is why I am here this morning." I looked at the folder. "What do you need?" "Everything you have. Photographs of Mr. Mercer meeting with Chloe Reyes and exchanging payment. The technical assessment from Tom Briggs regarding the vehicle tampering. The debt instrument you recovered. Any documentation your attorney compiled regarding Mr. Mercer's background and his connection to your winery. She looked at me steadily. And your statement. On the record, I stood up and went to the kitchen drawer where I had kept everything in a single envelope since Thursday. I placed it on the table in front of Donna and sat back down. She went through it piece by piece slowly, with the focused attention of someone who has spent 14 months looking at a puzzle and is now holding the last several pieces. The photographs from Marcus, Tom's handwritten service report with dates and technical observations, the debt instrument with Leo's shaking signature, Elena's compiled background on Dom and Vincent Mercer. When she reached the section on Vincent, she looked up at me briefly, then back down at the page. The vehicle tampering alone constitutes felony vandalism under California Penal Code 594, she said. Combined with the fraudulent inducement scheme, the unlicensed gambling operation, and the pattern of activity my unit has documented, we are looking at a significant federal case. Wire fraud, conspiracy, illegal gambling enterprise charges under RICO. She closed the folder. Mr. Mercer is looking at a serious federal sentence. She did not give me a number. I appreciated that. One more thing, Dana said, picking up her pen. Your son, his name appears in our documentation as a participant in the gambling events. I want you to know that based on what we have and what you have provided this morning, the district attorney's office will be treating Leo Vance as a victim of the scheme, not a perpetrator. She held my gaze. That will be reflected in how we proceed. Something in my chest that had been held at a specific tension for 9 days released about 1/4 of an inch. Thank you, I said. Dana gathered the documents into her folder, stood and shook hands with Elena, then with me. She had the handshake of someone who does not perform anything firm, brief, complete. We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Vance, she said. This helps us significantly. I walked her to the door. She stepped out onto the porch and I followed, stepping into the morning air. The street was quiet, the way Sunday streets are quiet. A different quality of stillness than weekday. Quiet, more deliberate, as if the city had agreed to pause. 2 houses down, a man was washing his car in the driveway, the hose running in slow arcs over the hood. Then I saw the vehicle. A dark blue sedan parked at the curb 3 houses past mine, unmarked, but carrying the unmistakable gravity of official business. 2 men standing beside it in plain clothes, their attention directed at the front passenger door of another car parked just ahead. Dom's car. I had not heard it arrive. I did not know when he had come, or why he had come to this street at this hour, or whether it was chance, or whether some part of him had known in the way that people sometimes know things. They have no rational basis for knowing that this was where it was going to end. He was standing beside his car with his hands already behind his back, his head slightly bowed, wearing the same gray vest he had worn to my winery on Thursday afternoon. One of the plainclothes officers was speaking to him in a low, even voice. Dom was not responding. He was looking at the sidewalk with the expression of a man who has finished calculating and found that the numbers do not come out in his favor. Then he raised his head. He looked up the street and found me standing on my porch, and for a moment that lasted longer than it had any right to. We looked at each other across the distance between us. I thought about Vincent Mercer being led away from my winery 12 years ago. I thought about a 19-year-old kid on a sidewalk in Fontana watching his father disappear into a police car and deciding in that moment that someone owed him something. I thought about what 12 years of carrying that weight does to a person, and whether the weight had been worth the carrying, and whether Dom had found any answer to that question in the past 9 days. I did not think he had. One of the officers guided Dom toward the rear door of the sedan. Dom did not resist. He walked the 3 steps to the car with the deliberate, compressed movement of a man making himself very small. The door closed. The sedan pulled away from the curb and moved down the street and turned the corner and was gone. Dinah was standing beside me. She watched the sedan go, then looked at me. "You knew he'd be here," she said. It was not quite a question. "No," I said. "I didn't know anything." She considered that for a moment, then nodded once and walked to her own car. I stood on the porch in the Sunday morning quiet for a long time after she left. The man 2 houses down was still washing his car, the hose still moving in its slow arcs, indifferent to everything that had just happened 20 yards away. I thought about 12 years. I thought about 10 days. I thought about how long it takes to build something, and how quickly it can come apart when the foundation was wrong from the start. I was still standing there when I heard a car engine slow at the end of the block, and a familiar set of tires crunch against the curb. I looked up. A car at the curb outside my house. Older than the coupe, quieter, the kind of vehicle you find when you have no money and need something that runs. The engine cut. The door opened. He sat there for a moment without getting out. I could see him through the windshield, hands on his knees, head down, the posture of someone gathering something before they are ready to spend it. I did not go down the steps to meet him. I waited on the porch. Sandra's letter was on the kitchen counter where I had left it, and her words were in my head, where I had put them, and I stood in the morning light and waited for my son to be ready to walk up to where I was standing. He sat in the car for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my phone while I stood on the porch. Not because I was impatient, but because I wanted to know how long it took a 23-year-old man to gather enough of himself to walk up 8 steps and face his father. 11 minutes turned out to be the answer. I filed that away without knowing what I would do with it. The car door opened. Leo got out slowly, the way you move when your body has been carrying something heavy for long enough that even unloading it hurts. He was wearing the same jacket he had worn to the race. I recognized it from the description Marcus had given me. Dark canvas collar turned up, and his face had the particular quality of someone who has not slept properly in days and has stopped pretending otherwise. He came up the front walk with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the steps. At the base of the porch, he stopped and looked up at me. I did not say anything. I waited. "I know I don't have any right to be here," he said. His voice was rough in the way voices get when they haven't been used much. I came anyway. "Come inside," I said. I held the door, and he walked past me into the house. He looked around at the empty rooms, the bare floors, the folding chair, the lamp, the 3 boxes against the wall. He looked at it the way you look at a place that is not what you expected, and you are trying to recalibrate quickly. "You've been living here like this," he said. "For a week," I said. "Sit down." He sat on the floor with his back against the wall. There was nowhere else to sit except the folding chair which I took. We looked at each other across the empty room. "I found out about the car," Leo said, "about what Dom's people did to it before the race. A guy named Ricky told me. At a gas station in Compton." He stopped. "I know that doesn't change what I did. I'm not saying it does. I needed you to know that I didn't walk into your house that morning knowing I'd gambled away money I had no right to lose. I thought I had a real shot." He looked at his hands. "I know that's not the point." "It's part of the point," I said. He looked up. "It doesn't make you innocent," I said, "but it makes the picture accurate, and I'd rather have the accurate picture." Leo nodded. He seemed to be gathering himself for something else, something larger than what he had already said. I waited. "I hit you," he said. The words came out flat and deliberate, like he had rehearsed the directness of them to make sure he didn't flinch away. I stood in your house and I hit you and I left you on the floor. I've been trying to find a way to say that for 9 days, and there isn't one. There's just the fact of it. I looked at my son. I thought about what I had said to Elena the night we sat in her office about giving Vincent Mercer 3 chances before calling the police, and how I didn't know why I kept saying that. I understood it better now. Some things you say out loud because you need to hear yourself acknowledge them. Leo was doing that. He had come here and sat down on the floor of an unfurnished house and said the thing directly without dressing it up or surrounding it with context. I owed him the same. I failed you first, I said. Leo's expression shifted. Dad, I'm not saying it to excuse what you did. I'm saying it because it's true and because you deserve to hear it. I leaned forward in the folding chair, elbows on my knees. Your mother knew. She wrote me a letter before she died. I found it this week in a box I hadn't opened since she passed. She told me not to love you in a way that never let you fall. She said that wasn't love. She said it was a ceiling. I paused. I built you a very comfortable ceiling and called it a good life. That's on me. Leo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. It had lost the careful control he had walked in with and was coming from somewhere less managed. What did she say? He asked. In the letter. She said to let you struggle, let you fail at something real, and to catch you after not before. I looked at him. I was always catching you before. I thought I was being a good father. I was actually making sure you never had to learn anything the hard way. Leo pressed his lips together. His jaw was working. He was holding something back with visible effort, the kind of effort that is not concealment, but containment. The difference between hiding a feeling and keeping it at a manageable size. I want to fix it, he said finally. Whatever that means, whatever it looks like. I want to fix it. I know, I said. That's why I'm going to tell you something. I stood up from the folding chair and walked to the center of the empty room. Through the front windows, the morning light came in, flat and clean across the bare floors, and the house was quiet around us. And I thought about all the mornings I had driven past this property on the way to the winery, and imagined Leo standing in these rooms making coffee, starting his life in a place that had some room in it. I sold the house on Elmwood Avenue last Friday, I said. You know that? Yeah, Leo said. What you don't know is why. I looked at him. I didn't need the money. The winery is solid. It's been solid for 15 years. I sold the house because combined with what I'd set aside, it was enough to buy this property. I let that sit for a second. I bought this house for you, for your 23rd birthday. I was going to hand you the keys 3 weeks from now and tell you it was yours. The silence that followed was the deepest one we had managed in 9 days of silence. Leo looked around the empty room at the high ceilings, the windows, the floors, the light. And I watched his face go through several things in quick succession, the way faces do when the mind is moving faster than the muscles can keep up with. He did not say anything for a long time. Then, Dad. Just that. One word with everything in it. I know, I said. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth. His shoulders came up slightly, the involuntary contraction of someone trying to keep something in. He was 23 years old and sitting on the floor of a house that had been bought for him, and the gap between what that meant and what he had done with the week in between was apparently too large for his body to process quietly. I let him have the moment. I did not look away, and I did not fill the space. When he had gathered himself enough to look at me again, I went to the kitchen counter and picked up 2 envelopes I had placed there that morning before Dana arrived. I set them on the floor in front of him. The first envelope held a key. Not the key to this house. "Apartment in Alhambra," I said. 1 bedroom, month-to-month lease. I've prepaid 3 months. I paused. "You'll take it from there." Leo picked up the key and turned it in his fingers. "The second envelope is an employment agreement," I said. "Warehouse associate at Vance Artisan. Start date is Monday. Shift is 7 to 3:30 Monday through Friday." I sat back down in the folding chair. "The position pays $16.50 an hour. Once a month, 15% of your net pay will be withheld and applied to the $40,000 you took from me. The car sold for $14,000 that's already been deducted. You owe $26,000. At current salary and the withholding rate, you'll have it paid off in approximately 4 years." Leo looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then he opened it and read through the agreement slowly, all 2 pages of it, without skimming. I appreciated that. It was the first time in a long time I had watched him take something seriously enough to read every word. He looked up. "What happens after 4 years?" "After 4 years, we talk," I said. "About what you want, about what you've learned, about what comes next." I held his gaze. "I'm not closing the door, Leo. I'm telling you that the door has a process on this side of it." He looked at the agreement again. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, found a pen, the same pen I noticed that he had used to sign the debt instrument in Compton, which he must have been carrying since that night, the way you carry something you cannot put down, and signed his name at the bottom of the second page. His signature was steady this time. Not the shaking scrawl from the warehouse. Clear and deliberate. He put the pen back in his pocket and looked at me. "The house," he said. His voice was careful the way you are careful around something that could break if you handle it wrong. "The one you bought for me." He stopped. Tried again. "Is it nice?" I looked at my son sitting on the floor of the empty room with the morning light across his shoulders and Sandra's words in my head, and 12 years of getting it wrong finally arriving at the particular moment where wrong turns into something that might eventually become right. I looked without looking toward the bedroom doorway, toward the locked drawer where Sandra's letter was stored, the letter I had been carrying in my jacket all week. The letter that had told me exactly what this moment was supposed to look like. "It's the nicest thing I've ever built," I said. "And it will be here when you're ready." Leo held that for a moment. Then he nodded once and got up from the floor. He was taller than I remembered standing up. Or maybe I had just not looked at him straight on in long enough that I had been carrying an older version of him in my mind. He picked up both envelopes. He walked to the door and put his hand on the frame and stopped there, not turning around. "I'll be on time Monday," he said. "I know you will," I said. He walked out. I heard his footsteps on the porch, then on the front walk, then the car door, then the engine. I sat in the folding chair in the empty room and listened to the sound of him leaving, which was entirely different from the sound of him leaving 9 days ago. And I did not move until the engine noise had faded completely, and the Sunday morning quiet had come back in to fill the space. Then I got up and went to the kitchen and made another pot of coffee. 3 months is enough time to learn a few things. Leo learned that barrel dollies are heavier than they look, that concrete floors do not forgive bad footwear, and that Marcus Webb arrives at the winery 17 minutes before anyone else every single morning, without exception or explanation. He told me this the way people describe a landscape they have moved into, not with complaint, but with the matter-of-fact tone of someone taking inventory of where they actually are. He was on time every day. Marcus stopped mentioning it after the second week because it had become unremarkable, which was exactly what on time is supposed to become. I drove to the Alhambra apartment on a Tuesday in December. I had a key, I was still the leaseholder, but I knocked first. When no one answered, I let myself in. The place was clean in the way that small spaces become clean when someone has very little and has decided to take care of what they have. A mattress on a low frame. A second-hand desk. 3 books stacked on the floor that I did not recognize. A $12 coffee maker on the kitchen counter with 1 mug beside it. I set the insulated bag on the table, rice braised short ribs, steamed vegetables, the meal Sandra used to make on cold Sunday evenings, the one Leo used to eat 2 plates of and ask if there was more. I had made it the night before. Then I took the small box from my jacket pocket and placed it next to the food. The box was wrapped in a piece of dark cloth, cut from an old winery apron. Inside it was a tooth, small and white and clean the way teeth look once they have become objects rather than parts of a person. I had kept it in the same jacket pocket as Sandra's letter for 3 months. The letter I kept. The tooth was Leo's to have. The note was folded beneath it, written in ballpoint pen on plain paper at my kitchen counter that morning. Your mother left us too early. I thought I could make up for that by never letting you fall. I was wrong. This tooth is what that mistake cost me. And I would pay it again because you are still here and you are still mine. Now stand up, son. The rest is yours to build. I let myself out and drove home. The roses had taken. I had planted them in October, Don Juan climbing roses, dark crimson, the variety Sandra had grown on Elmwood Avenue, identified from a photograph by a nursery owner in Arcadia who had not needed more than 30 seconds to name the cultivar. They were not blooming yet. December is not the time for that. But the canes were green and the roots were established, and everything was growing in the direction it was supposed to grow. I was sitting on the rear terrace watching the evening light leave the San Gabriel Mountains when my phone buzzed. Dad. I got home. There was food. I looked at the message. Then I looked at the roses in the fading light. There's a box too, he sent. I set the phone face down on the table. I thought about what was happening in that apartment, Leo at the kitchen table, the food in front of him, the small cloth-wrapped box beside it. The moment of opening it. The moment after. The phone buzzed again. I don't know what to say. I picked it up. You don't have to, I typed back. The light was almost gone now. The valley below the terrace had switched over to its nighttime configuration. Headlights on the freeway windows lit up in the houses below, the particular settled feeling of a December evening in Southern California when the air is cool and still and the day has finished making demands. Another buzz. I'll be ready someday. I promise. I sat with that for a long time. Long enough for the garden to go fully dark and for the cold to come in properly. Off the mountains. I should have gone inside. I did not. I thought about Sandra at her yellow legal pad writing a letter to a version of me that did not exist yet. Writing it anyway. Planting it in ground that was not ready, trusting that the ground would catch up. She was right about that. She was right about most things. I typed 4 words. I know you will. I sent it and set the phone down on the table and looked at the place where the roses were dark, now invisible but there. Rooted. Growing toward something that was not yet visible but was coming. That was enough. I have told you everything now. The tooth, the letter, the roses that are still growing in the dark. If I am being honest with myself, and at 60 years old, I have run out of good reasons not to be, I made every mistake before I made the right decision. I loved my son in a way that cost him the chance to become someone before this week, forced the issue. I thought providing was the same as parenting. I thought comfort was the same as care. I was wrong on both counts, and a broken tooth, and 9 days of watching everything fall apart were what it took to show me the difference. God has a way of putting the lesson directly in front of you when you have been walking around it long enough. I am not a man who says that lightly. But I have no other word for what Sandra's letter was sitting in that box for 11 years, waiting for exactly the right week to be opened. So here is what I want to say to you, whoever you are watching this tonight. If you recognize yourself in my story, in the giving, without boundaries, in the love that never says no, do not wait for the tooth. Do not wait for the floor. Family justice does not always arrive through courtrooms and lawyers. Sometimes it arrives through a locked drawer and a folded piece of yellow paper and the willingness to finally hear what someone who loved you was trying to tell you. These are the dad's revenge stories nobody talks about. Not the ones where a father wins, but the ones where a father learns. The real family justice is not what happens to the people who wronged you. It is what you build after. I believe that. I have the roses to prove it. If any part of this story stayed with you, leave a word in the comments. I read everyone. Share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And if you want more dad's revenge stories about family justice, real consequences, and the kind of love that tells the truth even when it costs something, subscribe and stay close. The next story is already waiting. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. It means more than you know. The stories on this channel contain fictional elements crafted for storytelling and reflection. If this type of content is not for you, we respect that completely. There is something out there for everyone, and we hope you find what speaks to you.